Welcome to episode 100 of the NTP Podcast, our first live episode. So thank you everyone for joining in our studio and also anyone that's joining online. Quick couple of thank yous. We started this in 2018, so 100 episodes, which is a fair old achievement. Not all of them are mine though, so quick thanks to Elben, who's in the office today. She's done a couple of our episodes as well. Linda has done a couple of our episodes as well as the Pots through 2018-19 as well. So thank you to everyone that's contributed to hosting that, as well as Janaea, who's been the person behind the podcast coming to fruition and also surviving to episode 100. So thank you, everyone. Episode 100, we're looking at Newcastle technology scene. That's what the podcast was born around, about sharing sort of insights into the who's who of the Newcastle technology scene and also some of the key projects that have happened. So today I want to try and tackle some key projects that have gone on, some key themes that affect Newcastle technology community and sort of share your opinions. So we'll kick off today with two well-known Newcastle technology legends, Matt Finch and Justin Hales. Let's kick off today. I'd love to share both of your opinions on the changes that you've seen in Newcastle technology community or Newcastle technology scene over the last 5 to 10 years. Like, it's changed pretty significantly. We're here in the Camplify office in Wickham. So I'd love to, let's start with you, Justin.
Yeah, well, I guess sort of when I started, without giving my age away, I think I've been on the Newcastle tech scene for over 15 years, let's just say that. Really the only thing happening in Newcastle was probably Hunternet. There wasn't really too much happening from technology perspective. There was a bunch of sort of tech companies doing their own thing. And I think certainly in the last few years, it's been a lot more of a community built and a lot more people sort of wanting to be involved and find out what other people are doing. And I think, people have really had the opinion that the, rising tide lifts all the boats, and I think that's certainly been the case. And I think, generally speaking, a lot more, Newcastle-based tech companies have got more airtime at a national level, which has been excellent, I think, for everyone involved in the scene. So, I think there's been some huge developments, and I think there's been a lot of people have moved back to Newcastle from being outside. There's been able to get more funding and a whole bunch of things. It's led to a huge growth in the amount of sort of tech companies that are based here and continue to be based here and not have to move outside the region.
Yeah, mate, the rising tide rises all boats. I know you're very much invested in the next phase of startups and the startup founders coming through. But you also worked with Trent Bagnall back in the day. So he was probably one of the first people in Newcastle to have a big technology success story.
Yeah,
you've worked under him, taken some learnings obviously from there, and now sharing that with your communities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I think a friend of mine actually created a piece of software that was actually a rival to Trent.
Yeah,
and Trent's brother was one of Trent's first customers, and I knew Trent's brother and pitched him this idea for this product and said, "Hey, this is a great product. You guys should use it in what he was doing in coal trading at the time." And he said, "Oh, my brother's written a piece of software. I really think you should go and talk to him and go and work for him." So that's sort of how I went and started working with Trent. But yeah, it was great to sort of be a part of a company that really started out of CCI Holdings, which is an old school company, and Trent sort of helped build that software, and then took it global, and we had probably, I would say, 80% of the top world's miners using that product, and we helped write lots of different modules for them to be able to take things from, a lot of times they were using whiteboards and you name it, to actually putting them in an IT system. So it was pretty revolutionary at the time, and we really sort of saw some massive improvements as technology grew and as we were able to get a lot more high quality staff into that business.
How you obviously seen that journey. You've seen, as you said, it was pretty from the ground up. It would have been pretty nasty and dirty to start with, and as you improve the processes, how do you think that experience and the mentorship that helped has helped both your journey and then you potentially helping others down the track, like that mentorship side?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think there's and not just through that journey, but even before then, my role before then, we put some of the first servers into data centres in Newcastle. We were putting servers into the NBN building in a leaky old TV studio as they were rolling out a fibre network across the state, and actually starting to help co-locate things and bring cloud technology before it was really cloud technology. So there's been a heap of people in that journey that have helped me, and I think lots of people have been very willing to help each other, and I'm certainly trying to replicate that now myself. So Trent had a really big impact on that, and before that it was Chris Deere and a bunch of people. So
yeah, mate. Last part on that as well. I think being in Newcastle, there's that regional small town feel, but also sometimes it can be a negative from a mindset perspective. Hey, we're in Newcastle, we can't build a global startup, and having now had quite a few success stories in Newcastle, do you think like that mentality starting to change when people like Camplify, ASX listed global player now, but built the team local here, staying here?
Yep.
Do you think that mindset change is starting to come through, or do you think we've still got work to do?
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's been a bunch of examples. Obviously there was QMaster and us, and we had Pegasus with Adam Boyle. Adam and I went to school together, so there's been a bunch of sort of people that have come up the ranks around the same time and have been passionate about technology and passionate as much about the hunter, and know that we have a big opportunity here. And then there's lots of, there's no reason why I can't do it from here. Yeah. So, yeah.
Mate, I'm Finchy. Mate, you spent some time over in Silicon Valley for, early parts of your career from a technology perspective. And then you've come back to Newcastle. I imagine going from Silicon Valley back to Newcastle. How long ago was that now?
11 years.
11 years.
Now, yeah.
Mate,
Yep.
I imagine the Newcastle technology scene that you've seen 11 years ago has changed a lot to what you see today.
Oh, massively. And before I get started, and you can edit this part out if you want, but I reckon we should dedicate this episode to Chris Deere. He's been a pioneer for the tech community in Newcastle. That'd be pretty special if we...
I don't think there's any need to edit that out.
Yeah. Anyway, look, to answer the question, 11 years ago, there was no meetups in Newcastle. I'd been involved in a lot of meetups over there in Silicon Valley, and really loved that community essence, that grouping of people coming together, sharing ideas, having coffee, having a beer. And so I started the Infracoders meetup after sort of getting involved a bit in DevOps and some of that community down in Melbourne and Sydney. And I was like, you know what, we've just got to bring people together here. We've got to start to get that community happening. Newcastle Coders Group, I think, is probably the first real group and meetup that we had in Newcastle. But, we really, I think, wanted to sort of build that community out more and get more people together. And there's heaps of meetups today, and everyone's coming together, and everyone's sharing ideas, and everyone's, having a beer and collaborating. And it's really great to see, I guess, that journey since I've sort of come back over the last 11 years, see Newcastle really grow into this flourishing tech community. And it's been a good ride. I think COVID's been really interesting, and that's changed a lot of things, and we can unpack that a bit more. But it's come leaps and bounds from where it was when I returned back here. So
yeah, for sure. And then from a jobs perspective, obviously for yourself, I don't think it would mean a wealth of opportunities or not too many different options or companies 11 years ago for you. But obviously the opportunities around today. But you've kept your career, stayed in Newcastle.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think when I was looking to come back from the States, I had a look at whatever the jobs were back then. I don't think it was Seek, but there was about one or two jobs that were sort of applicable to me, and I went and interviewed for both of them, and made the decision at the time to start with NIB, and I've been really fortunate with NIB to sort of be a part of their growth as well. They're a Newcastle-based company, and have been in Newcastle for forever, and really have grown into now a global company. They've done a lot of acquisitions over the time. The tech team's grown, my team's grown, so have definitely been fortunate to see that. And now there's lots of options in Newcastle. You've only got to look at, I think I'm still subscribed to Seek tech jobs in Newcastle, and yesterday I think the email came through and it was like nine jobs in one day, that were there and listed, and you'd know that very well. Half of them probably yours, but not just yours, but New Tech people. But I think that's really different to how it was back then, and now there's lots of opportunities for people. Chatting to one of the guys over here about a business they've just started out of uni, and I think that's so awesome that these guys can get together, come out of uni, start this business. They're doing really well. They've got plenty of work. It just wouldn't happen back then. So yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah, it's super interesting to hear both the corporate story and there's corporate growth as well as the startup growth. So obviously where the opportunities are growing within a company, and those companies are growing and building their talent locally as well as from the ground up, and starting from a very small team to building a global talent team here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like it. Enough from me. Would anyone like to ask a question of Justin and Matt today on sort of the changes that they've seen throughout that Newcastle last 5 to 10 years?
I'll go. Do you see any big players coming to Newcastle anytime soon? Like, is there any big tech companies that, with all the growth, you see the potential of that, I guess, growing further?
I think Newcastle in general has always struggled to get companies to come here.
Yeah.
And most of the companies that have been really successful have been started here. NIB is no different, and a bunch of them. So I think that's been our strength overall. But I don't see any reason why they couldn't be. And I know there's certainly a desire from both Lake Macquarie and Newcastle to sort of enhance that. And I think it's about sort of being able to show the benefits to people, show the strength of the calibre of people coming out of the university, and we probably need some more A-class office space for people, but that'll happen as the city develops a little bit more. But I really think for us it's about how do we attract those mid-level scale-up companies that can become those big companies through being here.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd add to that one is we're 80% remote now at NIB, and we've recruited lots of people that are outside of Newcastle, but you've also got the inverse. I know lots of people that work for Canva and Atlassian and some of the big tech companies that are now working in Newcastle and working remotely. So I think I used to feel a sense of urgency of attracting these people here to try and set up these organisations here, but you can now actually get jobs with these companies and be a part of the Newcastle community still. So I think that's pretty great.
We should find a way for those people to start their own companies here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that's something we'll dig into a little bit later as well, like the opportunity for people to work for a global player, but then still, can be part of the Newcastle technology community and contribute to the community locally, whether they then flip out their own business or just even contribute to some of their learnings that they've learned with one of these global players and contribute locally as well.
I'm going to represent Sarah here and say you've got a question over here that you probably should ask.
So the question for our podcast listeners is, there was an explosion of tech groups in the last years, but it's now started to shrink. How do we keep the positive momentum going? Or is the plateau normal? Finch, I'll go to you to start with, because you did mention the groups to start with.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think COVID's hurt that, and remote working's hurt that. I think different to Sydney, the Sydney meetup scene in Melbourne, I guess too, was always off the back of workers in the city being able to sort of knock off and then go and have a beer and get together and share some stories and whatever it looks like. Newcastle probably always struggled with that. There's not a huge amount of organisations right here in the city, and so I remember when we were starting the meetups, it was half NIB because we'd all knock off and that's what we'd do. We'd go have a beer and maybe talk about some stuff, and some other people would join us, and then it sort of grew over time as word got out. But there's still, Newcastle, I guess, and the Greater Newcastle region is pretty spread out, and so you had a lot of people that would have to travel 15, 20, 30 minutes to come into the meetups, and so there was always a barrier there, and now you've got people like myself that live 20, 25 minutes away from the city here that aren't just knocking off and able to easily go and participate in a meetup or join. So I think it's definitely been hurt by that, but look, I think the community is still thriving. I think there was probably a consolidation that needed to happen, and that's certainly happened from what I can see. There was lots of niche meetups, and I think I had 3 of them at one point because Meetup allowed me to have 3. So I was like, oh, well, I'll run a futurist one, I'll run a DevOps one, and I'll do something else. And
NFTs.
Let's not talk about NFTs. There's some very expensive JPEGs. But yeah, now there's been a bit of a consolidation back into, Coders Group's obviously still around, and they can represent a lot of the sort of different niches. And I think that's probably important over time, is that Newcastle is probably too spread out and probably doesn't have that scale to support so many different meetups and communities. So let's sort of bring it together and put a bit of focus into small areas. So.
How important is the university to the Newcastle tech scene, and does it have much impact?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important. We have worked pretty closely with them, thanks to Jono, over the last couple of years, and we've really developed some really great talent out of there. And I think now that they're really wanting to do more of the job placement stuff, that's helping massively.
The work integrated learning programs.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's a really they're really stepping up their game. We've also done a lot of stuff with data science and sending a lot of our team to those programs. And so I think both through all those things and then wanting to get more women involved in the tech scene, that they're all really important initiatives that can help every tech company in Newcastle.
I agree.
Yeah, I just add I agree 100%. I think we're sort of involved with them at completely different ends. We participate in the Big Day In, where they sort of bring everyone together there, and some of the later high school students to sort of expose them to opportunities and what's possible there. And then we're also looking at PhD programs and how we get some of our data scientists and people like that working in an integrated way with the university and starting to sort of build out that capability. And yeah, I'd love to see the uni working even more, with corporates around. I remember, I think you were part of this, Justin, the Star 4000 program there that Slingshot and the uni worked on, and I went to that and participated in that, and it's had a really positive impact on my career, all the learnings that I took away from that. And I didn't go and fund a startup after that or build a startup, but I took that back to the corporate I was working in, and there were so many valuable things that came out of that as a discrete learning opportunity. So I'd love to see more of that too.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, we meet with pretty much every startup that comes into Newcastle, and every single one of them is like, we're going to forge a partnership with the university. Yeah. We're going to be the one company that all the talent goes into. And then they come and understand the nuances around that. So I think most companies in technology understand the benefit of the students coming through the University of Newcastle. It's just trying to build those pathways and give students opportunities.
And the other thing is the best time to start a tech startup is when you're straight out of uni.
Yeah.
Like you've got the ability you've just learned everything. You've got fresh ideas. You don't have financial commitments. So, I think that's the other real part that I'd like to see develop a lot more.
Yeah, and I think back to what we were talking about earlier, seeing other people have some successes with that, having some mentorship around that really will help that in the future.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you guys for your time.
Congrats for episode 100. I remember I was trying to hide a water bottle under the table on episode 1, and now I've got a beer in my hand, and
we've
here we are. So that's awesome.
Mate, appreciate it.
Well done.
Yeah, well done to yourself, James, and everyone else in UE Tech people, Linda and etc. for all the great work. I think you guys have helped contribute to that community overall massively. So yeah,
appreciate it.
Big congrats.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
All right. We started to touch on this, but I'm keen to get some other people's opinions on it. What would it take for the Newcastle technology community to triple in size? So a couple of options: a global tech player to come and set up an office here, a local startup to grow with international presence but build their talent in Newcastle, multiple ASX 100 companies to come and set up offices in Newcastle, or just simply it can't be done. We can't triple in size based in Newcastle. While the answers coming in, a couple of guests, Jono, Millgate, and also Dan, DVH. Mate, if you wouldn't mind coming up and sharing your opinions. I know if you've worked in a couple of different places outside of Newcastle, I'd be keen to see your opinions on some of the other communities that you've worked in and, maybe have some contribution to this one. So at the moment, we're looking like the biggest opportunity, I think, from all our responses so far is local startups to grow with international presence but build their talent in Newcastle, followed by a couple of multiple ASX listed companies coming to Newcastle. It's good to hear that no one says it can't be done. I think it's a very valid question. Like tripling the size is pretty decent. Like I think that could be an opportunity, or it could be a very valid option, and not necessarily a problem. Like if we never triple in size, is that a problem? Are we good with the size we are and provide opportunities for people, especially with the rise of remote work, to live here but work outside of here? it's not necessarily a negative thing. But Dan, I'll start with you, mate. Keen to share your opinions on, do you think it can be done? Is there anything you've seen in other communities or other technology communities or places that you've worked that you think you could take some learnings from there to apply to Newcastle that could help us potentially triple in size in the future?
I think it's kind of already happening to some degree. I mean, I think one of the main things to realize is that we are already doing that kind of stuff. We've got international companies in Newcastle playing in a global scale. Biscuit's got 40 countries. Camplify's got 7. There's it's already happening here. And I think it is actually starting to drive some growth here. The best thing about it is, again, the COVID factor and all that kind of stuff. People have started moving into the rural areas and working remotely in places like Sydney still. That means that there's talent here for us to get to work in our local market. So we need to try and show those people, like, you don't have to work in Sydney to actually play in that game, that international space, and actually come into our community and actually join our community, not trying to do this remotely like we currently do.
Because that definitely was a problem in the past. Good, solid technology professionals would come to Newcastle and not have the opportunities locally to work, so they'd have to chase the dollars elsewhere or just chase the jobs elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what I've seen in other companies is very similar to what happens here. There's usually a company that draws a lot of people in, and then once those people are in, they disperse into other places. So I think again, Camplify is a good opportunity for people to come in. Biscuit's a good opportunity for people to come in. We've brought some people in from external that are now based here, and those people are all part of this growing community there.
And NIB has been a part of that, I think, for the Newcastle Tech community. I know, Matt and Jono both spend their times at NIB, but it's definitely, NIB's been one of the biggest technology teams in all of Newcastle. A lot of people gone there, had a lot of successes, and then gone out and had some successes elsewhere as well. So, I think NIB tend to be, or have been, that player for us in the past as well.
I might just expand on what you're saying. I think, you don't have the option on there, but it's going to happen. It's not that what do we do to make it triple in size, it's going to happen.
Just time.
Just a bit of time. What we're seeing, and as you've said, the amount of people that are moving to regional areas, Newcastle and Lake Macquarie especially, post-COVID is higher than anywhere else in the country. And we know that there are people from large international tech companies moving here to work remotely. So it is happening. How do we better communicate with those people and bring them into this community and build that from where we're at? I think that's going to be the key. So it will happen, and it is happening. We're probably just not as aware of it as maybe we thought. But it's going to take some getting at some of the questions on there. Bringing more ASX listed companies here, bringing major tech players here will accelerate it. And can we attract them? Sure. We've got the talent here. We've got the experience. We've got a major university here. We need potentially government support. Can we get the local councils, the local governments to do something to bring a major player here? But again, we don't need it. It's going to happen. It's how do we direct it when it does? Yeah.
I just also want to say things like /new.
Yeah.
Oh God, that is a game changer, I reckon, for Newcastle tech scene.
Yeah, whoever thought of that? Genius.
Because and I'm serious, because if you can actually get people from Sydney to come here for /new, right, and come and attend those events and see what's here. Right, that's going to be a major game changer. I love the forum at /new, where it was like different people and people could choose where they go and all that kind of stuff. That's great. They've got a similar one in Perth called Developer. Very creative name. But that was fantastic as well, because it's a similar thing. It was a community who pitched talks, and then the community kind of votes up the talks and then goes and does the talks and things like that. So you kind of engage that community then. And if we can make Newcastle part of Sydney, then we'll have a very...
It's an extension of Sydney.
I know, right?
Yeah, quick shout out for the /new team. We'll link them up in the podcast notes. But I also think, quick plug for them, I think they are looking for sponsorships at the moment, and we'll be looking for speakers in the next couple of months. So first conference based in Newcastle, purely tech focused conference, ran last year.
Second, really. If we don't talk about DevOps days. That's okay. I was part of that as well, so it's fine.
Yeah. But /new was 350 participants in year one. A lot of local companies sponsoring and supporting it, as well as some companies from outside of Newcastle. we're looking to grow on that for you too.
Yeah, we'd love to. We'd love to try and make that a yearly thing, sort of an amalgamation of all of the meetups. As we were talking about before, maybe there's a bit of fatigue since post-COVID in those meetups, but if we can provide a space for everyone to get together and network and talk to each other and bring people, like we didn't meet until then, right? I didn't even know these guys existed, and your office is like the suburb next to where I live. That's what the community is all about. That's what /new and all of this is all about, trying to understand who's here and who the players are, and let's get together because we've got similar problems. Let's try and solve them together.
Yeah. The previous people who spoke, they kind of spoke about the fact that the remote working has become a problem because now the community is no longer in the city and can no longer easily meet up.
Yep.
But I was sitting there thinking it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise for the companies like ours in Lake Macquarie, because that means that we can find a central place for everybody to get up together, not just the people in the city to come together. So I think maybe we should just think about that a little bit in terms of how do we create those communities where everybody in the whole Hunter can get together
It's not just about Newcastle, is it?
Exactly.
Newcastle is a big area that's fed with other local areas that, the Hunter region is huge. There's players all the way up the Hunter region.
Exactly,
down to Lake Mac, and how do we bring them all together?
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think the Hunter part's a big one. I know Justin, big part of the melt, and I think we'll tap into that part a little bit later, and tapping into the Hunter's actually strengths and playing on the back of where we're already strong, right? The Hunter isn't just Newcastle CBD. It is a bigger area, but I think there's a big part of that. I think the other part you also just mentioned there before about not knowing each other. That's not knowing each other in Newcastle, right? Newcastle's always had a problem with not talking strongly enough about themselves and their successes. Biscuits, it's a thing, right? You're based in Lake Macquarie, you're playing on an international scale, and not a lot of people know about who you are. There's other people in Sydney or somebody that maybe has a little bit more ego to them. There's a lot smaller, doing a lot less, but talking a lot more. And I think a lot of Newcastle companies have got a tradition of actually doing that and not talking themselves up and not promoting themselves enough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think we've got some today that they're doing a better job than we ever did in the past. Viv is doing an amazing job down there, just coming out of nothing, and everybody knows who he is now. And I think that's a big change that we've seen in Newcastle a few years ago, as Justin alluded to. That wouldn't have happened. But now we've got a great community where we can help foster that and help these companies, and we can see them do great, amazing things.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Jono. Thank you, Dan, for your contributions today. And we'll move on to our...
There are questions on the board. If you want to have anything to do with /new, you get a slashnew.tech. If you want to sponsor or fill in the expressions of interest, just go there and hit us up, or follow us on LinkedIn and hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to anyone.
We do have a question. What's one piece of advice you give to anyone trying to organise a conference in Newcastle? Jono?
Talk to me first and don't compete with me. It's tough, hey. It's not easy. And I think the guys who run the meetups will say the same thing. This is not something you kind of just think about doing and then a few months later it happens. It's a lot of work behind the scenes. It's
voluntary work.
Voluntary work. And we're not doing this to make money. We're not doing this to try and raise profiles. We want to have a thing here in Newcastle. We want to make the scene better. We want to communicate and collaborate with everybody here. So it's a lot of long, hard work. I think it took us 8 months or more of planning on and off, and for the first one, and we've given ourselves almost a year to plan the next one, and it's tough. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I feel like that. If somebody is trying to do it on their own, potentially as opposed to having a secondary one.
Definitely get a good team together. Make sure you've got the right people focused on the right things. It's the same as building a business. I feel like the CEO of it, you look at this person to make sure they're engaged in this and what are our action items for the next week. I feel like we're back at the startup days again and just getting stuff done. It's a lot of work.
Probably ties into Finch's point before around collaboration, as opposed to having a heap of different meetups or a heap of different conferences. Let's just do less is more and do them well. And you were speaking to it before as well, Dan, about it's a long way to come in, or how do we do it? Instead of having lots of little ones, let's just do a couple of things really well.
And I can tell you from other cities I've lived in, they've tried to make all these little spin-offs and they never work, right? But the people who then start collaborating together to make the bigger one bigger, they're the ones who get the recognition. So it's not really, you can't think about it as this monopoly of a conference. It's a collaborative community effort, right? And so everybody comes in together instead of having these niche spin-offs that doesn't quite actually draw the crowds.
Don't compete with each other. We're
Yeah.
trying to work together here.
Yeah.
The community's not big enough to have offshoots. So if we can work together, then we can actually achieve.
Yeah,
something
exactly,
Really
yeah.
impressive. Great.
Thank you for your contribution today, lads.
Thank you.
No worries.
Appreciate it. Has a rise in remote work made Newcastle a more desirable location to live for technology professionals? Answer is yes. Access to jobs locally and remote while living here, or no, still needs a move to a major city or international to achieve great success. All right. Rise in remote work has it made it more desirable for technology professionals? I would start with the affirmative, and then let's see if we can create a discussion around it.
I think I'm a really good example. Like, I work from Caves Beach, which is like a micro of the micro, I believe. It's like the like a little corner in Caves Beach that no one even, or in Lake Macquarie, that no one even knows about. And I've had a business now for 18 years and clients from everywhere. And I'm sort of running a little microcosm of what you guys are doing with Caves Beach Connect. It's a little community out at Caves Beach, and we have about 60 businesses turn up on a quarterly basis. And now I've just attracted someone from the Silicon Valley who's looking to move to Caves Beach. Sorry, not from Hollywood, that does special effects for Game of Thrones. He reached out to me because he found out about what we're doing at Caves Beach on LinkedIn or on the internet, and just asked me all these questions, and I sent him all these things. And one thing I've realised is really what we're selling is lifestyle, and that's probably something Newcastle should be doing more of, is selling lifestyle. And that's what remote work is, right? We're all here to live a good life with our family, like, beside the beach or in the cafes and the good schools and good infrastructure. So I think we probably need to sell that a bit more rather than the tech side. So showcase the lifestyle, and that tech people who are smart and have got money are then going to want to come here, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of my perspective of it.
Yeah.
And being able to do it in a micro of a micro, I suppose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people agree with it, right? A lot of people say, hey, if you can live in Newcastle, it's cheaper than living in a major city. There's a lot of benefits from, just a purely location perspective, near beaches, some really nice locations around. And if you can do that and do it cheaper and still have access to jobs, then why not, right?
100%. If you look at what's happening in America with the chaos of the world, California, and people living in the streets, like everything's it's very hard to live over there. And so if you're smart, why wouldn't you move to Newcastle?
Yeah.
You've got that lifestyle as well as having the internet at your fingertips to be able to develop whatever you want.
I like it. Adam, you've built a team of 18 now, I believe, locally here in Newcastle. Your business is a little bit different as well because you do have a hardware element as well. So, you probably could be working fully remote for you, but interesting to see your take on this one. Do people and some of the people that you've attracted in your team, do they have better opportunities to move away? Is that, can they stay local?
Yeah, so I guess just to frame the context of my response here is I run a design agency and we specialize in building industrial hardware tech. It's all physical. So it doesn't get built remotely. There's no way to do it remotely. And the examples of competitors we've seen trying to do these hybrid things, the results are fairly laughable. So I think it is possible to work and grow remotely. The asterisk on it depends on your context. If you've got a capability to have a digital nomad, then you've got a great competitive advantage. You can scale up, but obviously all your competitors do as well. So I think the grain of salt that we have to take with all of this is around, what is it we actually do? And what do we do here in the Hunter really well? We mine shit. We mine shit really well, right? And that's all in person, right? And so there's, many bits of digital tech that can be tacked onto that, but ultimately it boils down to drilling, hauling, digging, explosives, all physical. And I think that's where the Hunter's strengths really lie, and is basically scaling those bits of tech.
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies that have been built, technology companies being built in Newcastle that actually tap into that market, right? And I think that's one of Newcastle's strengths, and we'll sort of get into that, I think, in a later question as well, around playing to our strengths, right? We don't have to be the SaaS hub of the world. Why not lean into, the opportunities and the strengths that we do have local here in the Hunter, lean into that and double down on our strengths, as opposed to trying to be something where we maybe don't have those advantages.
Yeah, because it's probably not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Is Newcastle going to become the SaaS hub of Australia? Maybe. Probably not. But, probably not. And because we're going head to head with the rest of the world, right? We're competing on their terms. And then we've got all the disadvantages of being in Australia and none of the upside. We throw it all away. So yeah, I think leaning in more to our existing strengths is probably kind of, where I was going with it is, I don't know if being completely digital nomads is probably a way to that. So anyway, my hardware perspective.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very real point, right? It's leaning into those strengths. I did get one of the questions come through. What are your thoughts on attracting more digital nomads to Newcastle? Are the benefits in bringing more digital nomads? I got a take on that one. Like, I don't think it plays in that hardware space at the moment. I think there is a benefit of bringing digital nomads if they contribute to the culture of the community locally, right? And it's the same with anyone that lives in Newcastle that works outside of Newcastle. If you can bring your experiences or back to the Newcastle community and help other people locally, or if you can contribute to the community or contribute from any which way in growing that community locally in Newcastle, you don't have to be working here, but that digital nomad space, I feel like that's a benefit to the community. If you're a digital nomad living in Newcastle not contributing to the community, then there's no benefit there.
Just in a dark room. Yeah.
Certainly not getting the hardware versus software debate, but keen to hear from all three of you how we can do a better job of selling the Newcastle dream.
I do this constantly, relocating guys and girls to Newcastle. If they're older and they've got families, I can't win. There's nothing I can say to them that will convince them. I can't move a partner. They can't leave their life. So you've kind of got to sell the younger guys on it. So the way I sell the dream to them is basically point out to them that even if they're on that Sydney, AI money, you're still going to be living in an apartment in the burbs, an hour on public transport to the beach. Here you can be 10 minutes from work to the pubs to the beach. And so I sell them the dream, and it's pretty successful, but I've got to sell to people, them and their partner. If their partner doesn't like Newcastle, man, it's all over. They'll leave.
I think you need like a real estate shortlist, don't you? Like a real estate hub that shortlists all the properties that they could afford within, a minute from the beach or whatever. So some sort of integration could, a way of doing it.
Yeah, I think both the councils have done campaigns around this. It's changed for us from a recruitment perspective over the last couple of years through COVID. Pre-COVID, there was really the opportunity, and it was great for Newcastle technology community. If people were moving to Newcastle, we could, they had to work locally because remote work wasn't a thing. And a lot of the people that we did see move to Newcastle were people that are either about to start a family or that were living in Sydney, weren't able to afford there and were looking for their first home buy up here, or were looking to start a family. As you said, if their kids are really embedded in school, or somebody's partner had, a very successful career and they didn't have opportunities locally, they become the challenges. Once people are in school, it's harder. You got more ties to your community, right? But those people that are about to start a family or were a little bit younger and looking for their first home, they were the real people that we would see, really funnel in. But I think both councils have done efforts, around that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, we've got our next poll going up. We're tackling, there used to be a thing in Newcastle and technology scene. Definitely there was a salary parity between Newcastle and major cities. Remote changed that for some people, for some companies, and didn't for others. So the question, what's the minimum salary increase you consider for a move to Sydney? 2x salary, would never do it. None, 1.25, 1.5 and a 3. Currently, we're looking at 44% of people would never consider moving to Sydney. It's now equal leaders with 2x salary. So somebody doubling their salary would consider a move to Sydney. So Jason, I might open the floor to you to start with. You're obviously a senior technology professional, spent a lot of time in Newcastle and have stayed in Newcastle. I'm sure you've had plenty of opportunities to move elsewhere, Sydney or otherwise. Mate, what's kept you in Newcastle? And would any of these numbers make you move?
Probably not. Money has never really been a thing for me. I think I was born in Newcastle, and I'll stick with what Justin said before. I've been in IT for more than 15 years, so I'll just leave it at that. So I have worked overseas. I've lived in the UK for a few years. I've been in Melbourne, been in Auckland. But for me, I've always just chased an opportunity. If I see a big challenge, something that excites me and I'm passionate about, I'll sort of go for it. So the money has not really been a thing. I would consider going to Sydney, but it'd have to be something pretty exciting, I think.
So it'd be opportunity more than just
it's more about the opportunity, and that's always been the thing that I've chased. And I was just going to say the question before about tripling the size of the Newcastle tech community. There was an option missing there, which I've followed, which is I've got 3 children, 2 have graduated software engineering and 1 is studying at the moment. So I'd encourage you all to do that and triple the size of the community. That'd be good. But I've always encouraged my kids to just look for an opportunity, look at something that'll make you better. It's something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And it's never really been the money.
And have you seen the opportunities change in Newcastle in your time in Newcastle?
So much. Talking before about how the community's changed, like, I guess back when I started, it was pretty generalist. It's really exciting. I think a lot of it's come through the startups that have been lots of really established. I mean, we're sitting in an office of one now, but, really established, big, successful startups that have really brought a specialisation of technology. So, meetups around AI, and Finch, you talked about a couple before, data, IoT, all those sorts of things. I think there's tremendous opportunity, locally now. So it's an really exciting time to be starting your career for sure.
Yeah, nice. And Ria, I can get your opinion on the question as well. Is there a number in mind for you, or is it no number's big enough?
Just echoing what Jason said, that there's just as much opportunity here now. That's my belief. I wouldn't move to Sydney for a monetary value. The only thing that would sort of take me somewhere like Sydney or Melbourne is easier access to clients when you're dealing with them face to face. That's not a good enough selling point for me. So, there's no intention of moving. Yeah. I think Newcastle has got everything that you would need. If you did want a salary increase to move to somewhere like Sydney, you'd have to look at least double just to be able to afford a house of the same sort of calibre as where you currently live. So I don't see it as really being profitable anyway.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, with obviously the rise in remote work, and then also not even remote work, but just Zoom and teleconferencing, makes your job easier that you can actually do what you do from Newcastle. Absolutely. And service clients in Sydney, Melbourne, elsewhere. Well,
most of our clients are in Melbourne. I go down there occasionally. Every single day I'm on Zoom and Teams with them. It doesn't cause any sort of barriers. It's just as easy. And
has that changed with COVID? Obviously pre-COVID I think there was a bigger desire for more face-to-face time. Yep. And then we've got forced to full teleconferencing. Yeah. Has that become easier for you going forward?
Yep, 100%. It's a lot easier because everybody does their day-to-day on Teams and Zoom now anyway. So even if they are in Sydney together, even if they're in the same building, they're often on Teams meetings together in different spots or with different branches of the business. So.
Nice. And if I flip this, right, so you run a business,
yep.
Do you price yourself as a discount being in Newcastle, or do you compete with people when you on the Sydney, Melbourne-based prices? Because I think Newcastle, in the past, it was definitely a thing. If Newcastle-based businesses were servicing outside of Newcastle, they would still look for the Newcastle discount, or we'd just play a little bit less aggressive.
Yeah, I find that people don't know that we're from Newcastle. If they're in Melbourne, say, they don't know where we are. We could be in Melbourne as well and just on Teams. So definitely no discounts there.
Yeah, nice. So it sounds like the money's really not the biggest player here. And in the tech world, I don't think there is. Definitely in COVID, it changed the parity when it came to salaries. And I think salary, there's more information out there these days about what people are earning. You might not get exact figures, but you have a very good indication. And I don't think there is that 10x opportunity out there anymore where you can go, hey, I'll get that somewhere else. So I don't think, there's that biggest disparity that it used to be. Yeah. So I think it definitely plays to Newcastle's strengths.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's not really a need to move anymore. It's different back when I graduated, a bunch of people I knew, they were always going to move. So they graduated, moved to another city, moved to Sydney or Melbourne or overseas or something. It was always the plan. I would still encourage someone, like a young person, to do that at some point in their career, but not for the money or not because they need to go to Sydney or Melbourne, just because it's a good life experience.
Yeah.
But the opportunities here are tremendous. And also the quality of people here, it's like, for those that have worked overseas, people in Newcastle, lots of people in Newcastle could work anywhere in the world. They're good enough, they could work anywhere. And I've been lucky to work with lots of people like that. And It's just, it's a great credit to lots of things, like the companies in Newcastle, the quality of the degree at Newcastle Uni, lots of things. So great companies that give lots of opportunity, and it's, the results speak for themselves.
Nice. You brought up a point there. I'd love to get both your opinions on that. Growing up in Newcastle, potentially Newcastle University, but going away, getting some experience outside of Newcastle and bringing that back. The benefits of that, I'll start with you, Ria, just your experience when it comes to that, like either with the people you've seen or your own experiences. Yeah. I think it can be really beneficial both to the local community and also individually as well, just getting that experience outside, what is a smaller city.
Yeah, I think absolutely. When I was younger, I went over to the UK and worked over there. I think that you gain so much experience and life skills from those types of things. My eldest daughter, she's doing biomed at uni, and she's in Melbourne at the moment for 2 years. She could do that similar sort of thing at Newcastle, but it's just that experience of going there and, spreading the wings a little bit, learning some different skills and then bringing that back. So it's really valuable.
I like it. Jace?
Yeah, I think for me, I love the UK. I could watch Arsenal games at, just after lunch. That was great. But yeah, it's the life experience and for me, it's I grew up in Newcastle, was born here, went to uni here, thought I would live here forever. And I didn't move until I was 35, and I just thought I need to experience something more. So I went to the UK for a few years and came back, and I'm like, it's just part of it. It's like that confidence. You can do it. You can, you match it with the best. And bringing that back, I think is good for Newcastle, but also good for yourself too.
Yeah, I like it.
But yeah, there's nothing, you're not missing anything technically by not staying in Newcastle.
Yeah, nice.
Great opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's changed over time, right? That would have been a different answer 10 years, 15 years ago. I think the opportunities weren't here. The opportunities to play with various different technologies weren't here. The opportunities to run a business locally and play with international or national clients wasn't here.
Yeah.
So I think that, times have changed, and COVID positively affected that as well.
Yeah.
Nice. Question, where do we see the Newcastle technology market in 5 years' time? Growing organically, continuing the growth we've seen in the past 5 years, with local companies continuing to grow their tech teams, getting slightly smaller, more people moving away for work but living local, working outside of Newcastle, not participating in the community. Same would reach our peak number of professionals and roles locally, or growing exponentially as Newcastle cements itself as a hub for technology. So you, Linda, you've recruited technology in Newcastle for over 10 years now? About 10 years? 14 years now. Yeah. So you've seen massive changes in Newcastle technology scene. You've seen both the growth of new companies coming, startups coming, work with companies from when they were very small to exits. Mm-hmm. Do you have an opinion on this one? Where do you think it's going in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm hoping it'll be growing exponentially, just selfishly, for our business.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I do think it's going to grow and continue to grow. I think, with the government providing incentives for businesses to start up here and the renewables tech energy hub starting up as well, I think there'll be a lot of growth.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think, as you said, there's a couple of multiple factors that come in that actually help the growth here. There's that organic part, but also for us to really kick on, it's going to take some external factors to come in. I like it. Josh, thoughts? You've been around Newcastle tech scene for quite some time as well.
Yeah, let's just say plus 15 years.
Yeah.
So I guess just to set the scene on my answer, just looking back at my history, 20 years ago, I graduated from software engineering, and I had to move. Like, there was no options in Newcastle for a job. So unfortunately,
I think I got you your first job when you came back as well.
You did.
That's Newcastle technology for you.
And I unfortunately ended up in Canberra.
But,
I moved around Sydney, and then did what most people did of my generation, is look to when we started to look at a family, move back to Newcastle. So that was kind of the pattern of things, but it's no longer the case. Like now, there's plenty of opportunities for graduates out of Newcastle Uni to get jobs here, and that's just a sign of, I guess, the growth.
Yeah.
And me personally, now I'm heavily invested in Newcastle and its growth, and that's because I have confidence.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I have confidence that it is, and I'm saying exponential because of that low start and where it's been in the last 20 years. I'm very confident in the growth.
Yeah, it was definitely a low base 10 years ago. And it's continue to grow. We also just got a question come through as well, and I think this will tie in really well because the question is, there are still more limited opportunities for juniors. How do we get started if we want to stay local? I don't think we can grow the Newcastle technology communities if we don't have more people coming in, right? So it's hard to attract seasoned professionals in, but surely we've got an opportunity to grow juniors. Lenny, you've been involved with a lot of juniors coming in, but also the university. You've got thoughts on?
Obviously, the integrated learning program is really great. I think not enough companies are getting involved in that. And when you think about software engineering or computer science, there's really only about 30 grads per year coming out of Newcastle University. But I don't think that there's enough opportunities for those grads here locally just yet. I think there's a lot more work that companies can do to engage students and create opportunities.
Yeah, I think we'd say a lot of people trying to hire people with the skills already to come in, and obviously if you're a business, you're looking for people to add skills to your team and add value right away. But that investment in the juniors, investment in trainees, could really be
hard,
done.
and it's an investment. You do need to invest in them. You can't just hire a grad straight out of university and let them go.
Yeah.
You need to invest time in them, and I think that's probably, for smaller companies, that's a bit of a challenge in terms of, the time that they have to do that. But I think, I know NIB does a great job. I know NGM Group does a great job. I'm not sure if Life Without Barriers hired a lot of grads, but I think there's more work that can be done.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress, right? And it's one of the things, it is an investment for companies, and if companies are struggling in a macroeconomic environment at the moment, trying to invest time of your current workforce into training up juniors is a challenge, trying to find that balance as well, right?
Yeah.
That's a real challenge. Josh, do you have any opinions on, trainees or juniors that you've worked with or how you've seen, is there enough talent coming through?
I think companies are hurting now from not investing in juniors for the last 10 years. And I've seen that across multiple industries. There hasn't been the cadetships or the apprenticeships or that. And now they're hurting because there was a bit of a wave of offshoring and that. And now they're like, where's all them, where's all our staff? Like, well, you didn't train them. You didn't hire the juniors. So I do expect it to come back now that they're realising that they have to start at the base and bring them in.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in COVID. So post-COVID, where we've seen every company looking to hire technology professionals and people getting in a salary race. We've seen now on a daily basis, everyone's trying to compete for talent, but compete on salaries and, better benefits. But it's also because you don't have that talent internal, or you're not building the right pathways through. And it's a race to the bottom. If you're just competing on money and salary alone, your technology team budgets can blow out very quickly. Yeah.
One of our clients, Qvalent, does it really well. That's their whole strategy for hiring. They just hire grads and just build them up and then bring in new grads. So they'll take on 6 to 8 new grads every year.
They've got the processes built in, right? They've got the strong training built in. So
yeah, and we used to have it in Newcastle. And you think about all the old school engineering companies in Newcastle, and everyone had cadets. It was something we did in the past that we just seem to have dropped off.
And thank you to our panelists or guests for the last question. If you don't mind, I might invite up both Sarah and Viv, who I know are both very much involved in community. I think you'll both have super strong answers in around, or discussion topics in around this question.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. All right, last question for the day. Just to reframe the question, 1 or 2 words. What's Newcastle's technology industry's greatest strengths for the people who are listeners? The absolute most favourite was community. We've got strong answers for NTP, people, beer, knowledge sharing, natural resources, lifestyle, mining, ambition. So quite a little bit around the community, quite a bit about Newcastle itself, and then the probably other part there is the actual people themselves. I think Jace alluded to that before. Maybe Newcastle, the people local who have grown up here or just live here have a certain thing to them, and which both contribute to the community as well. So, to our panelists. Sarah, you've been involved in Newcastle community for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, probably 3 years.
But super involved with the community, both as an organiser of the /new conference and also your own meetup. Why did you get so involved in Newcastle technology community? What was your motivator behind that? And why do you think that's so important?
I want to make it sound wholesome, but I literally injected myself into this space because there weren't many women. And it's really hard to be the first woman. It's awkward. People look at you. People make assumptions about your capability or who you are as a person. And it sucks a little less to be the second woman. And then it sucks even a little less than that to be the third woman. But someone has to be the first or the second, and someone has to just like barrel their way through it. And at an early age, mum and dad kind of rid me of most of my shame. So I just kept barreling through and tried to be really visible, because it's important that women exist in this space in a way that eventually will become normal. Like, I won't be a woman in tech. I'll just be a person who works in tech, and that's fine. But I'm not going to make any illusions to the fact that we're anywhere close to that yet. And that was one of my main motivations. And that's why I do the Women and Gender Diverse People in Tech group, because as a woman, there are other women in tech, but we all work in different areas and we don't see a lot of each other. And eventually, whether you like it or not, you start to feel a little weird. When no one else looks like you or has similar interests to you or was raised in the way that you were raised, with all of these weird societal pressures, it's hard to like really capitalize into like a sentence. You start to think that maybe you shouldn't be here. And we wanted to create a community that really reinforced that, no, you're valid. In tech, you belong in tech. This is perfectly normal. There are other people like you. Let's create a community from that. So mostly out of spite is the answer.
With a lot of positivity around it.
Yeah, positive spite.
No, I like it. And have you seen any significant changes in the technology community in your time?
Not in my time, I don't think. When we started the Women and Gender Diverse People in Tech group, that was 1.5 years ago, and we really weren't sure what the appetite for it would be. And we were really impressed at how strong the community engagement was, and have been impressed with it ever since. I know a lot of the things that I struggle with now as a person in business are really similar to the things that my mum struggled with as a person in business 20 years ago. So I know that progress is slow, but I would like to kick it up a notch. And I think as a community, just being aware that subconscious bias exists. No one means to do it most of the time, unless they're like an outright, I'm not going to get bleeped on this podcast, but it's usually not intentional. People have good intentions, but if you're not exposed to people that look or act different or have different backgrounds to you, then that's out of your radar and you don't know how to act or how to engage in a healthy way. So I just want to be present and start shifting the dial even more. So next time a woman joins the technology industry, they're like, wow, I've never been talked down to at a meeting or had something explained to me that I already know, or whatever else dumb stuff that comes up.
I should say, like, you know, the reason why I came to Newcastle was my mum was a single mum and she was an engineer as well, right? So it's incredible what you're doing, because at the time I remember, you know, she used to come home just crying all the time, because that was the attitude. I mean, the reality was she was the only woman and she was the only Indian person in general, right, amongst, you know, a bunch of blokes that are, you know, ex-tradies or boilermakers or whatnot, right? And she came from Singapore, and from that to here at the time, it was not good. You know, she was incredible. She was a brilliant engineer, but it was not easy, right? It's incredible what you're doing, because I think it is slowly changing. Not there yet, I would say, but yeah, it's not, yeah, wasn't pretty when she was you know, here.
My hallmark for success, and this is going to sound really weird, but is to get a healthy amount of mediocre women in tech. Because if you're a woman in tech, you're awesome or you're trash. And those are your only two options. You're either exceptional, wow, best tech person I've ever met, or you're horrible. You're not allowed to just be okay. And no offense to any dudes listening, but there are plenty of mediocre men in tech, and that's fine. They do a solid job and we respect that, but that's not an option for us yet. We're either one extreme or the other. So all I want is just average women who do a passable job to have success in the tech industry. You know, you don't have to be the best. You could just be okay, and that's enough.
I love it. I also love the passion. That's what the podcast is about, sharing like authenticity.
I also have a podcast. It's a lot more of this.
No, I do it. And I do acknowledge all the work you've done. I think you have done a good job, and you might not notice the difference, but I think that there is difference being made, so I acknowledge that. Viv, you went to Newcastle University and then you built a business with people from that university, and you've really ingrained yourself with the Newcastle community. Have you found that Newcastle community that has affected your journey in both coming straight out of uni and building a business and then trying to grow a business in Newcastle? How's that community affected your journey?
It's been interesting. We actually just crossed the 3-year mark just a month ago, right? So having a little bit of a retrospective, and we started the business up while I was a student. And funny enough, it actually started off when I did a work integrated learning position with the Melt. I know Justin talked about the Melt before, but Trent, Clint, and Brett, the guys there, had a fantastic experience there, and that was monumental, right? It's been interesting because, like I said, like Finch said before, and I think a couple of people have said, my attitude going into uni was I wanted to get out of Newcastle as soon as I finished. My dream was to go to the States, right? And the ridiculous wages that they have over there for software engineers, right? Or go to Sydney or Melbourne, just, learn. That's where I thought all the opportunities were. I was actually, funny enough, passionate about startups, right? Before, people building new businesses, especially software businesses and SaaS products, right? How are they doing it? I had no idea that was a case here. I was very fortunate. It's honestly luck that I did a work integrated learning with the Melt Accelerator here in Newcastle, right? Yeah. Starting the business up, I get to be here. I grew up here for 20 years, and not only do I get to work with people that are building cool shit, right, and cool new things, right? I'm helping businesses, even larger, businesses like Oracle, for example, figure out how they can take what they have or a really complex business problem that they have and build something amazing, an ideal solution that can, help their business processes and whatnot. And it's really, really fulfilling, doing it in the place I grew up at. Yeah.
Do you think, obviously Newcastle's quite well connected because we are smaller. Do you think that's played as an advantage for you, having a small business? Obviously,
100%,
it's easier, or maybe not easier, but you've got access to different people that being in a bigger city might not have, and that could be one of the advantages and play into that community aspect of Newcastle. I think the question was around Newcastle's strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look around the room, I see so many people I recognise, and Adam, partnering with Adam doing work, and Dan's there from Cyborg. Newcastle is a small, it is small, right? It's a small city. You could say it's a city, right? Yeah.
It's a large regional centre, I think.
And the beauty of it is we were able to, we were just a bunch of students when we started the business up, right? We had no idea what we were doing, but we're able to grow at our own pace. And the most important thing, and honestly the reason why we're here, is there's amazing key players here. I've already named a couple here already, but that have, spent their free time just talking and mentoring, right? And just being interested in what we do, but also sharing their experiences and their trials and tribulations through through their careers, right? As a young person, I'm sure everyone does have imposter syndrome, but if you're a developer, if you're a software engineer, it can be crippling, right? But the fact that in this small community there are amazing experienced people in business and in tech that are they're taking their time to actually spend time with not just myself but with the team of young guys that I do have. It's fantastic. I don't think that could possibly happen in Sydney. It could, but it might be much harder, I would say. Yeah.
No, I think the community aspect is a massive one. And it obviously provides advantages for people like yourself. We did touch on it earlier, the /new conference area. You're a big part of that. The benefit of a conference like that for Newcastle, to bring the community together, what's your thoughts in and around that, or the reasons why you're strongly involved and spend so much time and passion around that?
I think if you ask all of the organisers why we started the conference, our answers would differ slightly. My main thesis for the conference was there in COVID, a bunch of people that have moved up from Sydney and elsewhere working remotely. We have such a beautiful tech community, but it's really hard to find the front door. Once you're in, and that's great, but Newcastle as a whole tends to be quite insular. And it's hard to know how to break into that if you're on the outside. And I really wanted the conference to be a wide open door for everyone to get involved, because I love the tech community. And I was like, let's share this with everyone else. I also wanted to set And I mean, one of the main goals of the conference is to set Newcastle up as a place that you can succeed in tech without having to rely on Sydney. So we have those opportunities for professional development and networking and all of the other good stuff that comes with the conference locally. And you're no longer like attached to Sydney as like this gold holy grail of knowledge and things that you have to visit for. We have that in our own right because we are a thriving tech hub. And I think we do punch above our weight for how big of a city we are. And the new conference is kind of like a love letter to the Newcastle tech community, as far as I see it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
I was going to say, like, when I started the degree, there was nothing like that, you know. And I think, and just on uni, like when you're at uni, and I think there still is a massive discrepancy as to what, you know, you learn in uni and what people, you know, students know is happening in industry, right? There's actually there's a massive gap, and you know, things like the conference and, you know, what we see with you know, /new, right? It's, you know, having that ecosystem and constantly letting people in the community know, and most importantly, you know, the younger people going through uni, for example, right? It's massive.
But that's sort of tying one of the questions as well, and I think both of you can contribute to this one as well. What industries do you see growing in Newcastle tech scene over the next 5 years? Government, renewables are two of the questions. Sarah, you've worked in government before. You've also had like a really integral part of the community, so you see a lot of the different moving parts within the community. Do you have an opinion on an industry or a vertical that you're seeing grow?
I always have so many opinions. I actually wrote the above comment, which comments about how we're pegged in the 6 cities plan for renewable energy, net zero initiatives, military sustainment, and sovereign manufacturing. And I think, honestly, if we had to spell out what we're good at, it is digging stuff out of the ground. But that's not going to be sustainable forever. Yes, I know our coal often goes to steel, but glossing over that, we're going to have to look at new ways to do stuff. I think the hydrogen hub that we have pegged for Kooragang Island is really exciting, and focusing on that shift from fossil fuel reliant industries to renewable energy industries, kind of like how the CSI Road took their energy centre, which was definitely not there for fossil fuels before, and made it into a renewable energy research centre, is kind of the evolution that we have to take as a city as well, and really honing in on our strengths. We do have a really large RAF base not very far from here, so it makes sense that defence and military sustainment would be one of our key pillars. I think what we have to do is just make sure that we're not creating a disconnect between heavy industry and manufacturing and defence and the wider technology industry, because from my experience, there tends to be a separation between those two things, even though technology is such an important part that underpins all of that infrastructure.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think leaning into those strengths is 100% the future. And Viv, you work in a consultancy that works with multiple verticals as well. Do you have an opinion like on an area you're seeing continuing to grow?
Yeah, there's a lot of word about like renewables and, you know, ESG, for example. There's a lot of talk about it. In terms of, you know, if we're working with it, we do have a you know, a strong focus on heavy industry and, you know, say mining businesses, and they're very slow. So we help them innovate. And in terms of say renewables, for example, you know, we build software, right, bespoke software. The opportunities are there, but not really in the next, for us, probably not in the next 1 or 2 years, but maybe in 5 years' time. You know, when we see, you know, if there's ways to monitor data in some way and the data's coming through, what can we do with that data? And that's where we'd come along and, yeah, there'd be opportunity for us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's, again, leaning into our strengths. I think some of the strongest technology teams based here in Newcastle aren't necessarily technology companies, but companies that rely on technology. And like that's, again, leaning just into Newcastle's strengths. Where do we play well? And then how technology influences that, how the technology community can influence that as well.
Yeah.
Agreed. But quick applause for our guests on our last panel for today. Thank you, Viv and Sarah.
Awesome.
Congrats on the 100. Yeah.
Thanks, James.
Podcast guests would know Janaea. Janaea is behind the scenes from podcast from day one, has managed all the camera work, all the editing, all the recording. From the early days of the podcast, we were working out of a room which had a loud buzzing noise, which Janaea had to cut out on every episode. We've slightly upgraded our gear over the years and made life a little bit more difficult. But we did get asked a question. Keen for some reflections from episodes 1 to now?
Yeah.
Any key thoughts?
I mean, so many. It's been amazing because this was my first major role outside of university. So when I graduated, I'd anticipated moving to Sydney because I'd studied in PR and done some internships in public relations. So I thought, I'm probably going to go down that PR agency route. And then it just sort of came up a role with James, and it was listed as like 20 hours a week. It was like a part-time position for more of a marketing role, which wasn't what I had done. And it was a big lesson for me of like what can sort of turn into something else and pivot. And so when I started with James, he was like, what would you say about starting a podcast and helping me start that? And I was like, yeah, okay. Like I was just in that new grad, fired up, wanting to say yes to everything. And I guess to answer the question, a huge change is what I've seen in James. Like it's been amazing to see the transition of, like episode 1, editing episode 1. And then, yeah. And I mean, and that was with Matt over there. So it was cool because I've sort of seen the transition over time, but I didn't really know what was happening in the Newcastle scene, especially in the tech scene. I was so new to it. And just by listening to all of these stories, I feel like I've experienced and heard so much that I just wouldn't have had that exposure to, which is pretty cool. It's like my job really was to put everyone at ease in the process because...
Cutting out a lot of the
awkward
mistakes.
Pauses. It's more like there's a stereotype with tech people that they tend to be a little bit more reserved and quiet and not be frontward facing in front of a camera, and anyone would find it uncomfortable to have a camera pointed at them. So it was interesting to see what things I could do to pull out the most organic, natural conversation between you and a guest. And I think, it's just been great to see, I guess, DevOps was something that I thought, oh, cool, there's more tech startups happening and there's more going on in Newcastle. And then with /new, seeing Sarah work on that so hard and a lot of the people here as well from Camplify. So I guess, it's just cool to see that transition of growth in the Newcastle tech industry through the podcast has allowed me to see that. But biggest change would be James, 100%.
Getting old and more grey hairs.
But more confidence in, I don't have to edit James at all. Whereas I used to, and I don't now. So my role's pivoted now away from more of that heavy editing. But I still feel like we always said like the podcast was like my baby. So I'm very proud of the brand and what Linda and James have created. And
100 episodes.
100 episodes. And I think it's good when you're passionate and proud of something because you don't want it to go out and be half of what it could be. You want it to be polished and look nicely presented. And I'm really proud of that. I hope that is what comes out with what 100%. We post on social media. But James has been a really great mentor for me in my career. So thanks for having me on. Job.
I think everyone would acknowledge the quality of the audio and the quality of the video and the edits and everything gets done is top notch. Janaea doesn't put anything out unless it's class, and it's an absolute testament to you, and it's definitely helped the podcast. So appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
Biggest reflection of me has just been learning. Like I found it super enjoyable because it's been a learning experience for me. I tend to not, try to go question and answer. If I selfishly find something interesting, I ask more about it. So that's been super helpful or enjoyable. I think it's probably one of the most enjoyable parts of my job, having conversations with people and learning about sort of what they're doing and then shining a light on both them individually and Newcastle as a whole. So I think podcasts definitely help contribute to the Newcastle technology scene. Shine a light on, what's happening and some of the people there. So that's probably the part I'm most proud of.
And then the remote element too, we're able to speak to a lot of people who aren't Newcastle based about what they're doing.
Doing that on Zoom, not as enjoyable for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Zoom takes away that personal feel. Yeah. And I feel like the guest isn't anywhere near as comfortable either because staring through a screen is a lot harder to have a conversation that's natural than when you're in person. But 100 episodes feels like a big achievement for us. So it's so good to see everyone come along today because it's probably 2 weeks we had to pull this event together. We thought we had the 100th podcast episode coming in the future, and it was just the amount of content we had pushed it a lot further up. So really appreciate everyone coming today.
Yeah, appreciate it. And appreciate Janae, Sarah, and Will for pulling the episode together today. So thank you. Thank you to the guests. Long episode. Thank you.